All right. Hello to the folks who are just hopping on and joining us. Let's give it one more minute to let a few more people hop on to the webinar, and then we will get this party started. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. This is an intro to Revit, best practices for electrical contractors. Whether you're looking to switch to Revit, get a refresher course, or see if you can pick up some tips to improve your baseline workflows, this is the webinar for you. Presenting today is Alex Hanna from BIMTM. BIMTM and EVOLVE partner up to educate and train folks in using Revit, and I'm sure Alex will speak a little bit more on that. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and we'll send out the recording to all registrants. You can also find all of our webinar recordings and more Revit feature demos on the EVOLVE YouTube channel at EVOLVE MEP. We will be taking questions today, so if you have a question, please submit it using the Q&A function in your Zoom toolbar, and we'll probably get to those more towards the end of our call today. So thank you again for joining us, and with that, I'm handing it over to Alex.
Thanks, Marina. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Alex Hanna from BIMTM, as Marina talked about. I'm the educator here, and so today I'm here to talk to you guys about getting into Revit as an electrical contractor, some Revit features that are available to you, and then how Evolve enhances Revit to increase your workflow and throughput. So let's go over here. To kind of talk about more about BIMTM and Evolve and how we got together is, again, as Marina said, we're providing education on Revit fundamentals and basics, so you have a good foundation to then take Evolve and then enhance that workflow through through Evolve. And I'm going to show you some of the basic Revit stuff, like with modeling conduit, for instance. Evolve has custom families and stuff available for you. That kind of does a lot of the hard work for you, and that's kind of the efficiencies you'll see today. So to get down really down to it, electrical and Revit has benefits of 3D visualization. When you're modeling in 3D in general, you see better with clash detection, you have better coordination, and you can fabricate from what you see and what you put in there. When it comes to Revit and 3D modeling in general, it all depends about the information you put into that model. So, for instance, if you're modeling conduits and you don't label it properly, you use the wrong size, and you're using it just as a kind of like a visual 2D print, that's not what 3D visualization is there for. That's not what Revit's for. Revit's to use exact sizes and parts and pieces to then produce what you want for your sheet, label it properly, and then push that out to the field or to the shop for fabrication. The biggest barrier to entry into Revit is going to be buy-in from leadership. Now, excuse me. Now, I know buy-in from leadership can be hard. And really, it's hard to really get into Revit and get the foundational support and fundamental basic training unless you have leadership kind of pulling that through. Now, there might be a future webinar. We'll talk about what buy-in for leadership looks like and how you can use that as, to create buy-in. That's probably, I think, the biggest barrier to get into Revit and 3D modeling. The next thing, obviously, is the Revit license. Now, Revit in particular is an Autodesk product, which I believe right now is pretty pricey, but there's an AEC collection that goes along with it. Recommend getting something like that because then you have options and options for other softwares to integrate within Revit to even help the workflow again. The next step after, let's say, you get buy-in, you get your license, is training. Fundamental and foundational training for Revit is absolutely key to anyone's success into Revit or looking to get into it. Now, some people are self-taught, some people buy Revit and they kind of give them a book and they kind of learn on your own. I would recommend taking a course or a training that teaches you everything about the UI, the buttons from start to finish, and then that will give you a really good foundation to then okay, how do I integrate that into a workflow for where I'm at with manufacturing, prefab shop, architecture, whatever it is. The knowledge of the software is going to be key. And if you get that sooner rather than learning as you go, you're going to save a lot of headaches. You're going to end up being happier in life. And just, it's going to be better, an overall better experience getting into a 3D model system like Revit. And then obviously you have to have the willingness to learn. Change is hard, change is difficult. Willingness to learn plays a big part into um, the drive to keep going forward and learning about what you can do in 3D space. Um, with that willingness to learn, you can definitely, go further in not only the career, but going into Revit and just really pushing the boundaries of what you can do in 3D modeling. So then that takes us into kind of like the basics of Revit. We talked about proper training, proper basics, improving your knowledge and skills, and introducing Evolve to increase your efficiencies. We kind of went through that just now, but the last part, introducing Evolve to increase your efficiencies, is that very next step. So you've gone through, you're developed, your willingness to learn, you have a great workflow, you're an electrical contractor. Now you want to use Evolve because I'm going to show you here in a bit, you know, bending conduit in 3D space with basic Revit is not the most nicest thing. There's a lot of things to remember and things to consider when you're going through Revit. Evolve takes a lot of that hassle out. Also has many features and tools for modeling, and not only that, but also flowing drawings, which 1000% recommend over hand spooling. And again, I'm going to show you a little bit what that looks like today, going a long way through Revit basics. So in Revit, if you're familiar with AutoCAD, I'll use that as an example. AutoCAD has blocks and dynamic blocks. In Revit, we use something called families. So everything in Revit is built with 3D models or 3D elements, 2D elements. They're blocks always. With those blocks, you develop your system. So a conduit isn't a line, it's a 3D pipe moving through space. Fitting is a fitting, it's not a line, it's moving through 3D space. Benefits of families is they're custom or not custom, they're native to Revit. Being native to Revit allows you to customize and change the way they act and look to what you want them to be. So families are readily available online for download and purchase. A lot of companies use custom families to produce custom information that pulls out of them for their fabrication shop, whether that's numbering for parts and pieces of their assemblies or for on-site for better understanding of what part goes where when things get shipped. There's a lot of different ways you can use custom families inside of your workflow. Personally, I've used a custom family that creates issues that feeds to a schedule that feeds to an output. That's great, especially when we have to talk about ongoing things going on through the project and things we need to know more information about. With electrical, a lot of times you'll see custom families built for J boxes or maybe a coupling here and there, but a lot of that has to do with how those couplings and J boxes are labeled based on your workflow that you come up with. Let's see what's after this. Sorry, I think I have this one. Yep. So getting into Revit. This right now, I am in a 2D drawing. This is the floor plan, typical floor plan that you'd see. But what I'm going to get into today is I'm going to get into conduit modeling. So my mouse is pink, so it's easy to see. When I go up to the Systems tab, you'll see other disciplines here. And on the far right, you'll see conduit and different electrical devices and stuff here. I'm going to place conduit. When I place conduit and we'll select this button, I'll get a lot of information available to me up here at the top and my properties menu here. At the top here in my properties menu, you can see where I can adjust diameters, I can adjust height, I can adjust bend radius of far what the regular bend radius is that you put in there. In my properties menu here, there's a lot of information. Again, these can all be pulled out into a schedule for the most part. What's my top elevation, middle elevation, lower elevation. It tells me outside diameter, inside diameter, the trade size available. If I want to give it particular elements like comments or images or service type, I can then put that information in there. And you see I have Evolve installed, so Evolve has some other parameters. These are called parameters. Evolve has some other parameters you can use to label your equipment or automatically label your equipment using some of the Evolve families. To place my conduit is easy as just drawing a line. So click once and click twice, and there's my conduit. And if I wanted to go towards this wall, I can click again towards the wall and automatically get a bend. Now within Revit, you determine what that bend is or what happens when you go to a 90-degree from one area to another. So I went left and up. If I go left and up, that bend is this bend particularly. You'll see that also in my properties. It's an RNC conduit elbow without fittings. If I select my conduit, I have some options under here to tell me what automatically happens as I'm modeling conduit. So what bend is going to be put in place when I make a bend? What is the T going to look like? What's the cross going to look like? What are my unions and transitions look like? These are all families. Talked about families a little earlier. Families are what you can download and utilize inside Revit. So all together, I can go find a conduit elbow bend that I want to use for my conduit that fits my needs for my fabrication or for my drawings or for the field. And then I can place that here. And now every time I make a bend with my conduit, it'll put that bend in there and all the standings that it has. I'm going to go ahead and place some panels in here, and we're going to talk about connecting conduit to panels, doing some offsets and things like that. Back to families, everything is a family. So if I wanted to place a panel in here, I would insert a component and I would use the panel, the 3D element, to place it on the wall here. So I place a component. Up here is my type selector. I can come down under here and hit search, and I can search panels or panel. And I'm going to use this 100 amp panel. And as I hover over my wall, Revit understands that it goes against a wall. If it's on the inside or if it's on the outside, whether it's hung on the wall or it's inset, that depends on the family. I don't know if this one is inset or on the wall, but we're going to put it on the wall. And I can continually place them. So if I come over to the next one, I can place one here. And I can place one here on this wall. Revit understands that this panel has to be on a wall. I also have information on this panel as far as mounting height goes as well. Now I'm just in 2D and I'm able to adjust 3D elements on a 2D plane. So coming up to the top, I have elevation from level is 4 foot. So that means to the center of my panel to the bottom of the floor is 4 feet. I believe that's to the center, and we'll double check that. Now I have panels and I can have connectors on here now that I can drop my conduit into my panels. Adjusting conduit in Revit is extremely easy. Because everything is connected, I can drag my conduit back and forth to apply and move and adjust wherever that conduit needs to go. So a lot of times when I'm modeling conduit, and let's say I have to make a run from here out and then do the same thing for here, 5 conduits coming out of each panel. I'll quickly just rough out what I want for my runs to look like. Right, I'm gonna want this one to be, just go slightly over this way. And then I want this one to just come out into the hallway. Now I only have horizontal conduits set here. I do not have any vertical conduits. The reason being is I want to place my vertical conduits in a 2D view that is both like a section view or elevation. So to connect my conduits to my panels, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my conduit where I want to be on the panel. Because I want, let's say, 4 across here. I'm going to start one on the left here. I'm going to start this one on the left here. You could be more precise if you want by putting measurements and dimensions. I'm going to start this one here. Whenever I'm modeling conduit, I usually have 3 views set up. The floor plan that I'm working in, a section view that I will move around, and a 3D view that I will also be using to kind of visualize, like we talked about earlier, visualizing 3D elements in your model. So I'm going to run a section view real quick. I don't want a tag, I want a section, sorry. So this is my section view. This is the depth of my section view. I want to see across this wall on this panel. This is exactly what I need to see. I'll open it up. Few visual adjustments here. I'm not going to get too much into that, but you can see that here's my conduit and here's my panel. Now my conduit is only set 4 feet above the floor and my panel is 4 feet above the floor. So that's why it looks like this. I'm going to open up my section view, look at my ceiling. I'm just going to drag it up because now everything moves up. So if I go back to my floor plan, you won't be able to see it because I have an elevation. Floor plans are also 3D. We'll go ahead and fix that as well. My view range.
And Alex, when you get to a good point, somebody has a question about how to switch conduit types.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. What's that question?
It says, how do you change the conduit type from rigid to PVC?
From rigid to PVC?
Correct. Or any type to any type, essentially.
Okay. So when I select my conduit, up here is called the type selector. So in Revit, if this conduit wasn't non-metallic conduit RNC and it was, let's say, EMT, or if I had loaded in a family PVC, I can come in here and say, well, I want that to be EMT. So now that's EMT. You'll notice that this is still RNC, but this is EMT. So if I wanted to change the whole system, I can use my tab key, which is a multi-select or like kind of a cycle through selections. If I'm hovering over it, both my hands are here, I hit tab key once, it will highlight the whole system. If I hit it again on a larger system, usually it takes 3. With a smaller system, it takes 2. I can select it here. And now you see how this is grayed out. Everything in Revit has a category. Conduits and conduit fittings are 2 different categories. I can't change different categories to the same thing. I can't make a bend a straight conduit. It's essentially what it's saying. So I'm going to deselect my bend. I can come in here. It says there's multi-types here because one's EMT, one's RNC. I want to make it EMT. Now it's all set to EMT. I can change this to EMT. Now there's my EMT bend. So I can go from system to system depending on what you're putting in there. Now, if you're using, and Jeff, you can correct me on this, if you're using PVC, I don't know if that's going to be under conduits or plumbing, but basically you can do the essentially the same bends. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jeff.
Yeah, you can set up conduit types for any material, IMC, RMC, whatever you have. There's a whole menu where you can actually define what bend radiuses are and all kinds of other things for the various types of conduits.
Yeah, there's a whole list of electrical settings that you can come in here. It says tiny little arrow that they try to hide from you, but in here you can do angles. What angles are you bending at? This is any angle. So something about Revit is you can bend any angle that you want. If there's standard angles that you want to keep using, you can use specific and standard angles and it'll only bend those. Different types of wiring sizes, distribution systems, depending on what's coming in and what's going out, or what's coming into the property. Cable tray systems, conduit settings based on rise and drop. You have sizes here, load calculations, panel schedules, and circuit naming. These are all custom to whichever you want to set up. Something that I noticed in the electrical field so far that I know is a lot of people will not go through the hassle of setting up all those little items, and only unless it affects their modeling. The modeling is the keyest thing, and what they'll do is they'll create parameters here to show what that information is needed. Typically, that's a workflow that's used because of scheduling and fabrication purposes. You can do everything in that. You set a parameter up, you can put it in a schedule. Sometimes some of those custom settings you can't put into a schedule. Just some things to consider. And you can go as far as you want. You can go completely custom and do everything you want and set it up right, and I'm sure it'd work out great. Back to modeling conduit in 3D. So coming through here, I opened up my section view. I dragged my conduit up. It did drag the full elbow around as well because all these are connected. They're all the same height. And if I wanted to draw my conduit down, If I take this piece of conduit, and I'm just going to draw another one here. There's something that I want to show you guys is I drew conduit here, but I don't know the depth of the plane that I drew it on. Because everything is 3D, there's a mindset you have to come around. If I drew a conduit straight here, how do I know it's perfectly aligned with the conduit above? It looks fine on a 2D plan, right? But when I look at it in like a floor plan view, I'm way over here. So this is the a common pitfall that I have fell into as well, is when you're modeling conduit in a vertical space, you want to copy the conduit above down and use your tools to rotate them and attach them, rather than drawing conduit from scratch out of the box. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that conduit I put in here. I'm going to copy this guy down. There are quick keys for this, so if you're a quick key user or a hotkey user for AutoCAD, you can definitely take advantage of the hotkeys here and do that as well. So I'm going to copy it down. I'm going to rotate it here. And I'm going to roughly line it up where I want over the panel. The closer I zoom in, the more control I have over it. I can use a trim command, automatically put a bend in there. And when I bring my conduit up and I want to attach it into the panel, when I hover the top of the panel is blue. There's a little blue line there when I select it. This is what the top of the panel looks like. This is giving me a 3D view, the front of the panel. This is showing me the cross section of where my conduit's going in. So if you remember on the floor plan, my conduit was aligned to the left side of the panel. And you can see that here in this little 3D view and also in this cross section here. I'm gonna go ahead and finish that. And now my conduit's been connected. So you can see now that if I move this left or right, my panel's gonna go with it because my conduit's connected and it's set with the connection. What I'm gonna do now is something called parallel conduits. So running through, if I, sorry, I have the Zoom share thing kind of in the way here. I can't really select anything in my menu up here. Give me just a second here. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and select my conduit. I'm gonna go to my modify conduits. Where's my parallel conduit? It's under systems. There it is. So this parallel conduit button, what it does is once it's connected to a panel, you can copy your runs across. So I'm going to copy this run across. I have some options for my parallel conduits. So if I go over here to parallel conduits, it's going to ask me, do I want to do a same bend radius or a concentric bend radius? I typically stick with same bend. It's going to ask me how many horizontal conduits do I want. So if I want 2 there, I'll leave 2. If I want 4, I'll put 4. I want to put 4 across. And I want that offset to be, let's do 3 inches. Now let's do 4 inches. I might be coming out of the panel. Now let's say I want vertical stacks as well. So I'm going to put 2 vertical stacks, and then vertically they're going to be offset. Let's do 6 inches. Now I'm just putting numbers in here to show you how that works. Now that I've set that and I hover over my conduit, you can see some blue dashed lines going back and forth on either left or right side, depending on where I move my mouse. If I use my tab key, like I did before, it'll highlight the whole system, and now I can run parallel conduits to my whole system. Now a pop-up happened because I did a vertical offset, and you can see that my conduit isn't connecting into the panel. My panel's not big enough for that. So Revit is smart enough to tell you that, hey, by the way, I know you want to do this stack here, but what it's connecting into just doesn't work. You can't do that. So then you can adjust your panel for to do so. So I'm actually just use my undo key. I'm going to select my conduit again. I'm going to go to my systems tab. I'm going to use my parallel conduits, and I'm just going to change this back down to 1. And then I'm going to hover over it, use my tab key and select my runs. And there you go. So a lot of times I'll make a full run connecting to the panel wherever the longest distance. And then I'll do my offset depending on how many conduits I need to run to that section. And then I can take them, because I talked about adjusting earlier, and shrink them up. I can drag them back, drag them out. I can I can say if that's 10 feet or not. I can even right click and continue to draw a conduit right on top of here. So if I needed to go up into a room, now I can do that as well. If I'm a little short or a little long, I can drag it out and drag it in. I have a lot of options available to me to do this. The next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about offset 90s and just normal offsets. So just like your 90 elbow here on a plane, if I want to draw a conduit, and you see that I'm moving my mouse up and down, I have a angle dimension to the right here, and I can snap to an angle that I want. I'm going to do 45, and I'm going to come out. So I could do an offset that way. We can do a saddle this way. So a lot of different ways you can make your conduit on a flat view. On a 2D view, like we talked about earlier, you're going to have to copy your conduit down, or on a elevation view. So I'm going to take my section, I'm going to move it over towards here. And then in there, I will see my straight conduit. There it is. There's my bend. And just for purposes today, I'm going to delete that bend so I can show you the offset. I'm going to copy this down. I like to use the rule of a foot, just in case you don't know how far your bends work or how small you can get it based on the bends you have available to you. Usually a foot's a good number for me to work with. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to move it over this way. I'm going to copy it once more. And I'm going to actually rotate it 45 degrees. All right, no, let's do 30. 30 is a standard one here. I'll rotate it 30 degrees. Now, I can put it like this. If I want my there, I can put it here. All we're going to do is we're going to trim to this based on how we want our offset to look. So going back to my Modify tab, again, with my typical buttons I have, copy, rotate, trim, align, mirror, I'm going to use my trim command. I'm going to use my corner trim. And I'm going to select the pieces I want to keep to make the corner. So I'm going to keep this length and this length. And so I have a corner here. I'm going to keep this length and this length, and I have a corner there. There's my offset that I created in 3D. That's not shown in 3D, it's in 2D space. If I wanted to see it in 3D, oops, don't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and isolate this down to a 3D view as well. Here, I'll turn off the link so we can see what we're looking at. So you see all this. I'm going to make this fine. There's my offset in 3D. I can rotate around. So now I have the 3D visualization of where my conduit is. Before, when I was modeling this was not the same height as this. That's nothing you would have recognized in this view, right? Just looks like you're doing a normal ceiling layout. But in 3D, you can definitely tell that my conduit's too low. I can do an offset. I can visualize the distance between my offset from, if my conduit's there and I want to bring it up, I can drag it up and down a certain distance. I can also use my arrow keys up and down to bump it up and down to bring that distance even closer. Revit will tell me when it's impossible based on the fittings that you have in there with your families. So there's my offset now going under this conduit above. Do we have any other questions going on right now? I see one in the Q&A there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question is, you can only use parallel conduits with the same size conduit runs, not with different sizes, correct?
So I haven't actually played with that, but if whatever the conduit run is, if it goes to like 2/4, if it goes from like hypothetical 2-inch to 1-inch to a 1/2 inch, and they're all part of the same system, you can use parallel conduits in that. That's using that tab key. So let's see, if I want to draw a conduit and then I want that conduit to be 1 inch, I'm gonna go this way. It's gonna put a box there for me. And then we're gonna test this out right now, so you can see that it works. Using my tab key, you see how it highlights the whole system? It's because they're all connected, right? So if I use my parallel conduit now, let me rotate this so we can see back to where we were. So I want to run my parallel conduits again. System, parallel conduit. You're going to see it highlights all the way around the bend, all the way above, and it's going to put J boxes in there as well. Now, the family that's already automatically in here for Revit is this massive J box. That's not typically what you put in there, but that's what the standard, that's what's set up right now for this Revit template. So it's in there. But yeah, if you have full systems you want to use parallel runs with, you can do that. How are we doing on time? Awesome. I do want to show you guys how to do a offset 90. So I'm going to run, and I'm going to do it this way here. So I'm going to delete all this here. And then I'm going to delete all this here. I just want to be able to make a nice clean space so I can show you guys. So what I want to do is I want to put an offset here and connect that offset directly into the 90 rather than straightening out. So I'm going to take the section view here. I'm going to delete this 90 here. I'm just going to raise this up a little bit. I'm going to copy this over. I'm going to rotate it 30 degrees. And now what I can do is if I hit my move command, I can move the center of the pipe. Notice how there's a little pink X there. It might be hard to see on your screens, but it's aligning to the center of the pipe. And I'm going to move it over here. Use my tab key. I'm going to align to the center of this conduit here. Best that I can. And again, I can use my trim command. I can even do this in 3D. So let me come here. I'll rotate this around so you can see this better. So using my trim command, if I go to modify and I use my corner trim command, I can trim my offset and I can trim, well, can't trim my 90. Let me do this in here. Just put a T in there because it wasn't straight. Give me just a second here. The goal here with the offset 90 is you want to get as close as you possibly can, lining up these two elements. So dragging this here, putting it there, I'm almost lined up right there and it automatically put a 90 in there. That's your offset 90. With Revit, this is kind of the struggle with the offsets and moving the conduits and modeling them is when you're doing any kind of complicated offset 90s, rolling offsets, which I'm not going to attempt today, which you can get into in a later webinar. Those offsets are harder to build because they require more kind of guesstimation based on where you want to place them. Now, the 90 that I put in here, if I try to use the trim tool, I can't use the trim tool with this. Well, at least not one direction. I can't go this way to that way, but I can go this way to that way. If I wanted to go to a section view and I drag this over, the center of this didn't highlight. It's just kind of stopping at certain points. So if I kind of leave it there, it's going to create the 90 for me automatically. So Revit is doing a lot of the process for you as far as putting that bend in, rotating the 90, so it's 45 degrees or 30 degrees. But the fact is that there's a lot of guesstimation with it. The beauty of Evolve on top of whatever I just showed you is Evolve has all these offsets pre-made families. So just like I connected a conduit to another conduit using a corner command or placed a fitting inside of my model, you just place that offset in your model. And then in your properties, you have information to say, how long is my leg? What's my offset angle? What's my bend? You have a lot of options to customize that bend to what you want. What's great about that as well, using parallel conduits, all that stuff comes with it. So I'm going to run parallel conduits again here. And then I'll show you why we use Evolve for that too. So systems, parallel conduits, using my tab key, you see that's going to do the full offset. It can't do it on some of these because the conduit's too small. So let's try on the outside here. So we'll do the outside here. Now, you would expect this to come straight out and then these to come straight up. But if I go to my side view and I kind of highlight, you see that it's going down at an angle. What I really want to do is I want to bring these conduits up. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my section view out. And actually, I'm going to use what's called a window time. So if I hit WT, I can now open all three windows. I can see it in 3D, I can see it in 2D, and I can see it in section view. So I'm going to take this section view. I'm going to flip it this way. I'm going to bring it this way here. So you see my section views changed. Now I have all my conduit, straight conduit here. Now I can use my arrow keys to bump this up. So now you can have typical offsets that you would, because you never, I mean, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not going to have conduit offsetting at an angle like that. So again, this is part of the struggle of using some out-of-the-box Revit electrical systems is you have to do some manual labor to make sure it's all correct. Now coming in here, if I rotate around here, that offset looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. If this was connected in the panel, they'd all be connected to a panel. And that's basic conduit modeling in a nutshell when it comes to Revit. With Evolve, you have a lot more tools available to you as far as like maybe there's some disconnects. Maybe this is slightly off and disconnected. Well, there's a tool that will automatically connect those items if they're a certain distance apart. If I had a rotate item two fittings back, so the whole system rotates 90 degrees, I can do that with Evolve. I can't do that with Revit. I have to go back and delete what I did to rotate that item to rebuild it. There's a spooling function as well, so I can create spools and automatically sheet that based on what I've built. With Revit, I have to highlight items. I have to create an assembly. We'll do this here. You'll give it a name. And then with that, I have to make custom views and detail all those views out and make custom schedules and detail those schedules out and then drag them onto the view. Whereas Evolve, I can open up a prefabrication, prefabrication manager here. It is. And I can spool that. So there's a lot of items that Evolve has that aren't available in Revit that can really enhance your workflow and make you draw way better than what you've been doing and even speed it up. You guys have any questions on that? So that being said, there's going to be a few polls that come out. Maria's going to help you with that. It's going to talk about, and I'm curious of, experience level of Revit that you have. What are some of the biggest struggles that you're having in BIM if you are having BIM struggles? And remind me, Marina, what's that last question on the poll?
Yep, that's going to be percent of projects done in Revit.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And we do have one more conduit question here. Jonathan asks, how do you change the color of the conduits?
Good, very good question. So I like to use filters. That's what I'd recommend anyone to use. And how filters work is based on parameters you have set in here. So if you have conduits set to a panel or you have them listed as a specific run, you can go to your, let's do this here. I'll go to my VV settings. I create what's called a filter. And I'm going to make a brand new filter. And this is going to be how I set up filters. I'm going to go down here, bottom left, work left to right. I'm going to call this my conduit filter. Now, if you were labeling this for specific runs, you would label that specific run or that specific type for filter. EMT, RNC, if it's low volt, high volt, whatever it is, that's what you label it, not as generic. The reason being is you're going to have probably a couple filters that are called conduit, which actually mean this run, that run, or that run, or this system or that system. So I'm going to call it conduit just for right now. I'm going to make sure I select conduit fittings and conduits for this because I want to color all my conduits and fittings. If I had panels, I can also apply a panel to it. Now, I don't have any specific parameters to pull because they're all the same. So I'm just going to leave this blank. But what you can do is you can pull a specific parameter and say, hey, based on the conduit comments value, which is over here in the properties we looked at earlier, I want it to equal this amount. And all those options will list up. And based on the comments value, that's what will get pulled. But like I said, I don't have any values in there, so I'm going to hit apply and OK. So now that I've made the filter, I have to add it to the drawing. And to make sure I'm adding it to the correct drawing, since I have my windows tiled, when I click into each window, you'll see the tab kind of highlight white again. I can also hit, I hit TW to window tile if I hit WT. Okay, give me a second here. It's reversed. It's TW to window tile or window WT to tile windows. I don't know why I keep getting an issue with that. So I can't tile my windows back. If I go to my view properties, I can do that here as well. Okay, so going through here, if I now add my filter here, so I go back to my VV settings, I'm gonna go to filters, I'm gonna add my conduit filter. I can change the line or pattern. So if I wanna change my lines from black and I wanna make them green, hit OK, and I hit apply, you'll see that I have green lines highlighted on my conduit. If I wanted to keep them black, but I wanted to change the conduit entirely, I can go here and change the solid fill, let's say, to blue. And then I hit OK, and I hit OK, apply. So now they're blue. So now you have different options to choose your colors or kind of take your conduit out and move it. That's how you would basically color your conduit. Any other questions?
Looks like we don't have any questions at the moment. So let's run a few polls and we can talk about them. And while we're doing that, you guys feel free to go ahead and submit your questions and we'll get to those as they come in.
Okay.
First question, let's discuss what % of projects are done in Revit. And Alex, I'm curious to hear your opinion. What are the big benefits of switching to Revit for the folks who might not already be on it?
So obviously one of the biggest benefits right now is 3D modeling and Revit and BIM are getting pushed onto clients to produce the information needed. So a lot of people are switching for that reason. Another benefit is because you have the information, there's kind of there's kind of like a CYA, right? Of I put the information in there. This is what it is. This is what you're going to get. Now with CAD files, you can't create smart ones. You can't put parameters in there. You can make lists. With Revit, you can see those parameters and see what's happening in the model. If you design it a certain way, or it gets modeled a certain way, or fabricated a certain way, you'll be able to see and test and see if it actually works in real life based on the model. That being said, CAD software, everything is straight. And as we all know, the real world is made of straight angles and everything in my house is square. So there's major benefits moving to a 3D model. The biggest benefit I see is that 3D visualization you have with coordination and modeling and information provided.
That's great. And let's take a look at these results. Love to see 60% of you are doing most of your projects in Revit. And you know, it's not surprising at all either that we have 30% of folks who are doing very little in Revit. And that's what we're out here trying to change, right?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a 50-50 split right now. It used to be more people in CAD than Revit about a couple of years ago, but I think more people are adopting. But there's still a lot of people maybe not in that space or using BIM or maybe not even using Autodesk for that reason. But yeah.
Great. Let's get to our next question. What is your biggest BIM struggle?
This is a very good question. And I'm not going to answer anything here. I want to see what people say, but it could be any one of these.
All of the above, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it really definitely depends on what your workflow is. I think that's probably gonna be a big dependent on what that looks like because a lot of these things can be fixed with plugins like Evolve.
Hey, there we go. All right, great. So let's share these results. It looks like a lot of people saying coordination and collaboration. And here at Evolve, I'm sure you too, Alex, that tends to be one of the biggest issues we hear our clients struggling with. So you're not alone out there.
We should just rename that to communication. No, there's definitely, yeah, placing hangers, spooling, project documentation, annotations. So I wasn't able to show too many of the Evolve tools today, but I know Evolve does automatic spooling. I know it does in project documentation. Definitely with placing hangers and putting hangers, you can do automatic points and locate points on the site. That's a great useful tool. And maybe in a different webinar, we can showcase some more evolved.
Yeah, and for anyone who is on the call, Evolve has tons of resources on spooling. If you're not on Evolve University, reach out to your rep or go to the website. It's a platform completely free for all Evolve users, with dozens of videos walking you through just about every workflow you'd hope to find. And we're always adding new ones as we add new features. So yep, those are good ones to check out. And again, I'll just throw it out there. If anyone's got any questions, want to go over anything that was seen today, drop those in the chat. And we've got just one more question before we wrap it, or one more poll question before we wrap it up today. What is your BIM experience level? And I think I'm just interested to see how many folks, feel comfortable in Revit. It was funny. I actually went to the Autodesk headquarters, and the product guys were telling me, I don't know how to use every single tool in Revit. No way. It's such a complex and expansive tool, and it's really interesting to see throughout the industry where people stand.
Yeah, I don't think anyone knows everything about Revit, but if they do, I'd like to meet them. There's a lot of different ways to move around it. Everyone, from what I've noticed, everyone models differently, but Revit has tools to make sure everything looks the same when it comes out. So there's so many different ways to move about Revit. Yeah, I'm curious of the experience here in the webinar.
All right, let's take a look at these results. Quite a few folks saying green but trying, and we love that. That's exactly why we put these webinars on and put these resources out there.
Yeah. Green but trying is always good.
Excellent. All right. Well, with no more questions from our audience, that's a wrap today. I hope that you guys all found the information valuable. If you're looking for more tools and resources, please reach out to BIMTM or Evolve, and we'd love to have a discussion with you about how we can help.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. Take care.